I beg to move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Matthew Pennycook.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to you for selecting this topic as the last to be debated before the Christmas recess, and in so doing providing me with an opportunity to put my objection to the closure of Woolwich barracks on the record. And as I may not get another chance, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I take the opportunity to wish you and the staff of the House a very Merry Christmas. I'm also pleased to see the Minister in his place. He knows Woolwich Station well, and I know, for reasons he may touch upon in his response, is extremely fond of it. And can I take this opportunity to say to him that the extremely courteous manner in which he has engaged with me over recent weeks on this issue has been appreciated. Madam Deputy Speaker, there has been an unbroken military presence in Woolwich since the 26th of May 1716, when a royal warrant in the name of King George I authorised the formation of 2 permanent companies of Royal Artillery in the town. The gunners' regimental motto is ubique, which, as you will know, means everywhere, and it could just as equally serve as a metaphor for the military's imprint on Woolwich, seen in everything from its architecture to its street names. The King's Royal Troop, Royal Horse Artillery, are quartered in Woolwich today, maintaining a bond between our community and our armed forces that spans 3 centuries. In determining, as it has, to sell off Woolwich Barracks by 2028, it is that bond that the government intend to break. Now, there will of course be those who argue that the disposal of the barracks has been a long time coming, that we should just accept that Woolwich's days as a garrison town are numbered, and that therefore the focus of this debate should be on the future use of the site and how we secure the optimal outcome for those affected, not whether the decision itself is the right one. If I were convinced that the department's case for disposing of the site was irrefutable, that would be the debate I would have called for and would be leading today. But I do not. I believe that the case for disposing of Woolwich Barracks has not yet been made convincingly, and I hope in the time available to probe the rationale that underpins the decision, and in so doing to hopefully convince the Minister to ask his officials to revisit the decision. In objecting to the closure of Woolwich Barracks, I want to make clear to the House that I do not seek to undermine the Department's Defence Estate strategy in its entirety. In his statement to the House on the 7th of November, the Defence Secretary was correct when he asserted that the current estate is too big, too diffuse, too expensive, and too inefficient. And he was therefore also right, in my view, to argue that it too often fails to meet the needs of our armed forces and their families. Just as the size and structure of our armed forces have changed to meet different threats over recent decades, so it is right that the defence estate is modernised and rationalised, both for reasons of affordability and efficiency. I fear that it will be extremely challenging to execute in practice, but I take no issue with the strategy itself. The issue I want to raise tonight is not whether the strategy to reduce the MOD's built estate is the right one, but whether it is right that the disposal of Woolwich Barracks should form part of it. And I believe that is not for 3...
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Matthew Pennycook.
And I believe it is not for 3 main reasons. The first, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that I question why the Department's approach to Woolwich Station has altered so dramatically over such a short period of time. It is worth recalling that it was only in 2009, in the Defence Estate strategy that preceded this recent one, that Woolwich Station was designated a core site. Sadly, no detailed justification for that designation was given at the time, so it's impossible to know what the detailed reasoning was that underpinned it. But it seems reasonable to assume, I would assert, that there were solid strategic grounds for doing so. And as a core site, Woolwich Station has been the recipient of significant investment over recent years. The Woolwich Development Project, announced in 2009, provided for new and refurbished accommodation. A new, purpose-built, state-of-the-art equestrian training facility and accommodation centre was built to accommodate the King's Troop following their transfer from St John's Wood in February 2012. And even now, funding is in the pipeline to comprehensively remediate and reinstate the King's Troop external exercise area on Woolwich Common following its use in the 2012 Olympic Games. I simply asked the Minister, what has changed about Woolwich in the past few years to so fundamentally alter the thinking of officials in his department in relation to the future use of the site, and to licence this government to write off the significant investment that has been ploughed into it over the past few years? Because I have to say, it will strike many of my constituents as little more than an asset stripping exercise driven by an analysis of rising land values in London rather than the requirements of our defence estate. The second reason relates to the first, and it is this, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am not entirely convinced that the strategic case for selling off Woolwich Barracks is as watertight as has been presented. In the correspondence we've exchanged over recent weeks, the Minister has assured me that the Department's estate optimisation strategy was formulated with military advice provided by each of the frontline commands. And I have no reason to question that assurance. But I do question whether the advice received has perhaps been sufficiently wide enough in scope, and whether, specifically, the Department, along with other departments, have assessed the value of the site as a strategic resilience location outside of Zone 1. Madam Deputy Speaker, our security services have had incredible success in foiling terrorist attacks on the British mainland, but the threat to the UK from terrorism remains severe. And if it were needed, last night's tragic events in Berlin are a timely reminder that we can never be complacent. Lord Harris's recently published independent review into London's preparedness to respond to a major terrorist incident makes clear that whereas the involvement of the military in the event of a prolonged attack or a move to the critical threat level was once seen as a last resort, they are now integral to the planning process. In the event of such a scenario, the military could now be deployed under Operation Tempora, which would allow for the mobilisation of up to 5,000 troops to increase the operational capacity and capability of specialist counter-terrorism and armed policing. So if called upon, it's clear that those troops would require accommodation, and as a strategic location outside of Zone 1 and close to the River Thames, I would assert that there is a case for looking at Woolwich as a site that going forward can provide that necessary resilience. And while I don't expect the Minister to comment publicly on such a sensitive matter, I would urge him to satisfy himself on this point by looking again at whether there is a strategic value in retaining Woolwich Barracks as a resilience location for response to a major terrorist incident or a comparable civil emergency. Madam Deputy Speaker, the third and final reason is that the closure of the barracks will have a detrimental impact on my constituents and on a local community whose very history and identity are intertwined with our armed forces. Of course, happy to.
Thank you for giving way and declaring interest as a former member of the Royal Artillery, and having done my training at Woolwich Barracks for the 2 weeks before I joined the TA. I remember as well not only the importance of the camp, I also remember the museum. We've lost the museum, unfortunately, and I do agree with the Honourable Gentleman in bringing this forward, and thank him for that. But it is important, and does he agree, that we need to have it retained for the core reason to look after the MOD, to look after the Army, and to ensure that we have it there for the future, because the future is uncertain, and for that reason we need Woolwich Barracks.
Matthew Pennycook.
I thank the Honourable and I believe gallant member for that intervention. He's absolutely right. I think this is a unique site, and there is good reason in terms of the risk of an uncertain future going forward to retain it. And he will also know that the collection that was formerly at Firepower Museum in Woolwich has been moved to Lark Hill, and I know will be, albeit in a different location, cherished and valued there, including the many medals that have been awarded to the gunners for outstanding acts of bravery. I'm also happy to give way to the Honourable and gallant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The one thing the Honourable Gentleman has not mentioned, which is incredibly historic about Woolwich, is the fact that it was the original Royal Military Academy, and is actually superior to Sandhurst in in priority terms, and Sandhurst has taken the Royal Military Academy badge from Woolwich, but Woolwich has that huge history. It's not just gunners.
Absolutely. He may know that the Woolwich Academy, commonly known as the Shop actually, because the first building was a converted workshop from the Royal Arsenal. It's luxury flats now. And that is the concern of many of my constituents, that the whole land on which the barracks now lies will simply be sold off for housing that many of my constituents cannot afford. So, picking up where I left off, Madam Speaker, I think the decision to close the barracks would have a detrimental impact on the community, and that impact will be felt by the whole community, not simply the staff that work at the barracks, because Woolwich has been and remains a garrison town. Indeed, it's difficult to imagine Woolwich without a military presence there. I recall the day in 2012 when the King's Troop returned to Woolwich. In the words of the then commanding officer, Major Mark Edward, the spiritual home of the gunners, where locals of all ages lined the streets in their thousands to welcome the troop back, which I think is a sign of the deep affection in which the garrison are held, an affection that has arguably only deepened in the wake of the tragic murder of Fusilier Lee Rigby on the streets of our town in May 2013. But it's not just a question of sentiment and identity. The regiments that are stationed at the barracks and those that have served there in the past have all supported the community in very practical ways. Every year, the garrison commander makes available his barrack field for an Eid in the Community festival that I think has done more than anything else to build trust and understanding between the local Muslim community and our armed forces. In the wake of Lee Rigby's murder, it couldn't be more timely. And all of that work, and I could give numerous other examples if I had the time, all of that will be lost, and the loss will be acutely felt if the barracks are closed by the local community. Madam Deputy Speaker, I will finish simply by saying this. I think it would be a travesty if an association, a bond between the community in Woolwich and our armed forces that has lasted for over 300 years was ended now for anything other than the most incontrovertible of reasons. And so for the strategic reasons I've raised, but also unashamedly for reasons of history, identity and sentiment, I hope the Minister will revisit the case for disposing of the barracks and come back in the new year with a reconsidered government position. Thank you very much.
Mark Lancaster.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and of course I start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Woolwich and Greenwich for obtaining this debate on the future of Woolwich Barracks and MOD site in his constituency. I also thank him for his kind remarks at the start of his speech in the manner in which I've attempted to engage with him and indeed other honourable members over what I absolutely accept is a pretty emotional process as we move to close a number of sites across the United Kingdom. He touched on the fact that I should absolutely declare my interest, not only as a member of the Army Reserve, but also as a member of the Army Reserve who is based at this barracks. It is my home barracks at the moment. It's where I go and serve. Of course, when we are faced with these decisions, they are personal, they are emotional, and it's not without considerable thought and effort that I have questioned this potential closure myself. So I want to acknowledge from the outset that the Department is ever mindful of the emotive nature of estate rationalisation, and that the concerns and feelings of all local communities affected by our plan have been and will continue to be considered as part of this decision-making process. But before I address this point in more detail, let me start by explaining the imperative behind our plan, something which the Honourable Member touched on. Our defence estate represents almost 2% of the United Kingdom landmass, equivalent in size to Luxembourg, or almost 3 times the size of Greater London, as perhaps we should say in this post-Brexit world. But whatever comparative you choose, it remains the fact that our estate is vast, and it is vital to our military capability. It's where our people work, live, and train, where advanced equipment is maintained and where cutting-edge research is undertaken. It's where major exercises are conducted and major operations are launched. It is vast, it is vital, but it is also inefficient and does not meet the standards we expect to provide to our people in a modern world. 40% of our assets are more than 50 years old. What's more, whilst the armed forces are 30% smaller than they were at the end of the last century, the estate has only reduced by 9%. That's why the 2015 Strategic Defence and Security Review committed to invest in a better built estate that will reduce in size by 30% by 2040, and that will, most crucially, better support the future needs of our armed forces. Last month, we set out how we plan to do this when the Defence Secretary unveiled our strategy for a better defence estate, the most significant change to defence land since the Second War. The strategy has two strands. Firstly, to rationalise and consolidate our estate, selling off sites that are surplus to defence needs and bringing people and capabilities into new centres of specialism. Secondly, we will invest, spending £4 billion over the next decade on improving our infrastructure and modernising our accommodation. In short, our vision is to create a world-class estate for our world-class armed forces, one based on the future needs of our armed forces rather than the needs of previous generations. Before I continue, I should say, given the scale of the strategy and the fact that it will be delivered over 25 years, these plans are subject to revision, but they set out our current intentions. But this is a strategy which we must deliver. Now, turning to the matter at hand, as part of our strategy, we have confirmed the disposal of 91 sites, which includes Woolwich. The decisions to dispose of these sites were made as a result of a systematic and thorough review of all of our defence assets by the Defence Infrastructure Organisation, working closely alongside Head Office and each of the frontline commands. And when it comes to the rationale behind our decision to dispose of the Woolwich site, the reasons are many, clear, and I hope compelling. Firstly, selling Woolwich will contribute to our overall aim of consolidating our defence estate into fewer centres of gravity and specialisation with better support capability. It goes without saying that given its size and location, the site itself is not suitable to become one of these larger centres. Let me explain further. When it comes to a supporting military capability, a barracks in an urban location such as Woolwich simply cannot compete with those located in less densely populated areas. Take for instance Bulford Barracks in Wiltshire. Here soldiers literally live on the doorstep of Salisbury Plain Training Area, the largest military training area in the United Kingdom, equivalent to the size of the Isle of Wight, and they are located alongside other units with whom they live, work and train. By comparison to Salisbury Plain's 94,000 acres, the entire Woolwich site stands at 252 acres. This includes an outdoor training area, but one that, as you'd imagine, is severely constrained. So, for instance, if soldiers want to practice live firing or conduct an annual personal weapons test, they must be bused an hour and a half south to Lydd Ranges on the Kent coast. What's more, when it comes to working and training, units based in Woolwich don't have the day-to-day access to other units that their colleagues or elsewhere enjoy. In 1 second. As such, they miss out on the vital exchange of ideas and tactics that gives an army its crucial edge. Of course I could.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for giving way. I accept everything the Minister has said. That's logical. What I'm concerned about is where is a unit like the Royal Horse Artillery going to go, which requires to be close to central London. And we've had all these facilities built in Woolwich specifically for the Royal Horse Artillery. And now, a few years after producing them, we're going to throw it all away. It doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Well, I will come on to that in a moment, if I may. But actually, in many respects, the site for the King Street Royal Horse Artillery at Woolwich is actually a suboptimal site because it's away from central London, where they historically used to be. So we are looking in another project at how perhaps we would be able to relocate at a site closer to central London where they perform their ceremonial duties. So actually, Woolwich is not an ideal site for them. They moved there out of need because of a lack of equine space elsewhere in central London. But I will come back to that in a moment, if I may. Woolwich dates back to the 18th century. The site has a proud heritage, but one that comes with a high price. The Grade 2 listed barracks were built 240 years ago and require care and attention far beyond anything modern purpose-built barracks would need. Of more importance, the technical accommodation on the site, meaning things like offices, garages and stores, will require extensive investment in the not-too-distant future. They are not set to support the armed forces going forward. And whilst the single living accommodation was modernised back in 2010 to ensure a good standard of living for our personnel, by the time we complete the disposal of Woolwich, we will have had 18 years of return of investment, and it won't be too long before further updating would be required. Finally, we must take into account the wider potential of the site itself. This is a key site in a popular London borough, which, with the introduction of Crossrail in 2019, will be a prime location for the construction of new homes for the capital's workers. But this is not the principal driver of this plan. So taking all of this into account, would it really be the best use of the defence budget and of taxpayers' cash to retain the site? Would pumping money into facilities that are constrained by their age and location really offer us value for money? Would it be right to continue investing in a suboptimal site due to the constraints that we have there? And would it be right to hang on to such a high worth site when the money raised by its sale would be reinvested back into defence estate where it's most needed? Having examined all the facts objectively and in great detail, the conclusion we have come to is that no, it is not right to hang on to the barracks. So what next? So having explained how we have come to this conclusion, let me turn to what will happen next. First, let me deal with the question of those living and working at Woolwich Barracks. There are currently 1,054 military and 97 civilian staff permanently employed at the site. I recognise that our intention to close the site is unsettling for all these people and for their families. But let me reassure you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and indeed the Honourable Member, that we will do all that we can to provide them with the necessary certainty of their future locations as soon as practicable. For operational reasons, I can't go into detail on the reprovision of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery further than I already have, following my honourable friend's intervention, and the reprovision of the other units on site, including the 1st Battalion of the Royal Anglians, as it's yet to be determined. But what I can say is that all military personnel, regular or reserve, will be relocated with their unit or reassigned in accordance with existing career management procedures. Civilian staff will be managed in accordance with normal departmental policy and processes. Formal trade union consultation will occur well in advance of any closure, and where possible we will look at other locations where they can be employed. There are also a number of third-party users of the site that we would wish to give the opportunity to find alternative locations with plenty of time. Secondly, let me deal with the future of the site itself. My department has begun the process of assessing the Woolwich site for sale. The findings of this will better inform the disposal process and ensure the revenue situation becomes clearer. The MOD, as do all government departments, follows a set process for disposing of any site. Once declared surplus to defence requirements, a site is placed on a register of surplus public sector land, a database managed by the Cabinet Office, which provides an opportunity for other public bodies to express interest in acquiring sites before they are placed on the open market. Subject to planning permission, land at Woolwich could potentially accommodate 3,000 housing units in support of any future government house building targets, but any decision to use the land in this way would of course need consultation with the local authority, who would seek the views of local residents as part of that process and indeed have to pass planning permission for appropriate housing for the location. The MOD will continue to liaise with the local council and planning authorities to ensure that the best possible future use for this site, and the local community will be kept fully informed of all developments. Which leads me to my final point, one that goes to the very heart of today's debate, the impact of this closure on the local community. As I said at the start, the department is ever mindful of the emotive nature of estate rationalisation, and all the more so with the links between a community and the armed forces, which are so steeped in history, such as Woolwich. Heritage and tradition are, after all, something the armed forces set great store by. This year marks the tercentenary of the Royal Regiment of Artillery, and indeed my own corps, the Corps of Royal Engineers, raised in Woolwich in 1716. And to this day, Woolwich Station remains a thriving and integral part of life in the borough, something I witnessed for myself when I attended Armed Forces Day there earlier this year. And I saw the great support that the barracks had from local people. The units based at the station enjoy living and working there. Likewise, I know that the local community hold these units in great esteem, as the Honourable Member said in his opening remarks. We in Defence are truly grateful for the steadfast support we have received from the people of Woolwich over the centuries, and I appreciate wholeheartedly their concerns and the concerns of the Honourable Gentleman, who I must say has conveyed their concerns and expressed their wishes very eloquently here in the Chamber this evening. But a modern armed forces must continually evolve and move with the times. We must ensure our people have an estate that supports them and provides a working and living environment they rightly expect. So I urge the Honourable Gentleman to see our decision to sell the Woolwich site for all it is, a well-calculated judgment that forms part of a wide-ranging, painstakingly considered and carefully constructed plan, a plan to secure the future of our armed forces and the safety and prosperity of our nation for many decades to come, and a plan that benefits the Woolwich community by bringing an opportunity to use this great site in a new way to the borough. Having said that, since the Honourable Gentleman has been so courteous, and his simple request was that I should go and look again at the detail of this decision, I will commit to him to doing so in the new year once we return. Winston Churchill, who can always be relied upon for an apt quote, once said, "If we open a quarrel between the past and present, we shall find that we have lost the future." We stand at that juncture now, so as hard as it may be, and despite the commitment I have just made, it is currently our collective duty to look upwards, outwards and forwards, and to work together for a better defence estate. Thank you.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Order, order.